Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Now today I'm going to be talking about the Overwatch League Mid-Season Madness Tournament, not qualifiers tournament, which just finished. Now obviously this was all together, so this was a global tournament between the West and the East teams. So the West teams have to go over to Hawaii just to minimize latency of the league service in South Korea, while the East teams will stay in their home locations. And so this is the first time this year that the two teams from each region, the teams from each region will compete against each other, and we can kind of see who is the better region pretty convincingly, we can tell. So let's first have a look at all the teams first before we get into the results. So here's the top 8 for the West region. So we got the San Francisco Shock, the LA Gladiators, the Dallas Fuel, Houston Outlaws, London Spitfire, Atlanta Reign, Florida Mayhem, and the Toronto Defiant. While for the East, it is the Seoul Dynasty, the Hangzhou Spark, the Shanghai Dragons, and the Philadelphia Fusion. Now let's have a look at the bracket, and this is what it looks like. So I think the first one was the Atlanta Reign versus the London Spitfire, and it was the London Spitfire winning that match 3-1 against the Reign. Backbone, he's just, I think Hardy and Backbone, they're like the Chads. Actually, it could be also maybe like Admiral, I guess, as well. But Backbone, he did a really good job, I must say. I think the Reign were a bit lacking. They did lose to the Spitfire as well earlier this season. So I'm not that surprised that the Spitfire lost to the Reign. And there's also, it's also been a bit of a rivalry as well. That the Spitfire versus the Reign, bit of a rivalry going on there. So yeah, obviously I could tell that this was a pretty good match. Next up, it is the Shanghai Dragons versus the Toronto Defiant, and this was like this was the first look that we got to see against the East, against one East team and a West team. A very convincing win for the Shanghai Dragons against the Toronto Defiant, 3-0. For the Dragons, and Lip did get MVP. Next up, we got the Hangzhou Spark versus the Philadelphia Fusion, and it was Shy who got MVP, and the Hangzhou Spark winning. The Fusion have been inconsistent, I'll be honest, very, very inconsistent. Don't know what else to say about that, but yeah, they did make a good run to the low bracket though, so at least that's good enough. And then it was the Houston Outlaws versus the Florida Mayhem, and it was a 3-0 victory for the Houston Outlaws, and Merritt got MVP, so pretty good for the Outlaws. So I move over to the upper bracket quarterfinals, and it was the San Francisco Shock against the London Spitfire, a 3-1 victory for the Shock. Not surprising there, the Spitfire, they did put up a pretty decent fight, but it was Proper, obviously Proper, who got MVP and won against the Spitfire. Then it was the old rivalry from last year, the Dallas Fuel versus the Shanghai Dragons. It was a 3-0 victory for the Shanghai Dragons. Lip once again got MVP. The Fuel did not look good at all this tournament. I was expecting them to at least make it to maybe the low bracket semifinals. It just wasn't the case, really. They just struggled a lot. Even though they did only verse the East region teams, that's not good enough for Dallas Fuel standards. Then we got the LA Gladiators versus the Shanghai Dragons versus the Houston Outlaws, and it was a 3-0 victory for the LA Gladiators. I think this is also the first time Ryan has been MVP. A tie as well at Midtown. I think isn't that like the first tie this season? I might be wrong though. I think I am. I'm not too sure. But good result for the Gladiators. And obviously they did win the whole event as well. And then it was the Hangzhou Spark versus the Seoul Dynasty. The Spark actually did pretty good on this tournament, but it just wasn't really enough though. Seoul Dynasty, that's a different story, I must say. Alfie got MVP. Dynasty, I don't know what the hell they're doing during this tournament. For the low round 1, it was a very close game for the Atlanta Reign versus the Seoul Dynasty, but it was the Atlanta Reign surprisingly winning that match. I was very surprised that the Reign won this. I thought that the Dynasty was going to bounce back and win, but somehow the Reign did it. and Kai got MVP, and I do not know what the hell the Dynasty was doing. I don't know, like, I think they were obviously practicing. It's weird because they were the first seed in the East region, but they lost to, I mean, the Spark, makes sense, kind of makes sense for the Spark, they are, like, the only team that could maybe compete against them. The Reign, though, they were, like, what, like, 7th seed, I think, if I remember correctly, for the West region, and they won against the Dynasty, so definitely shows that the East teams are weaker than the West teams. So if you're, you know, it's like, yeah, like, so that means if your favorite team is from the East region, you're not gonna have a good time when these global events are happening. But Kai got MVP in the Reign advances. Next up, the Houston Outlaws versus the Toronto Flying. This was not supposed to be this close, I'll be honest. This should have not been this close at all. But it was very close. It was a 3-2 victory for the Outlaws. Last year got MVP. I can't remember which match it was, but I'll say maybe in the next one with the Outlaws. But something pretty funny happened, but I'll get to that later in a bit. You probably already know what happened if you saw on Twitter. But last year got MVP, Houston Outlaws winning that. The Flying, just like I keep saying, they've been an absolute afterthought in this whole season. I completely forgot that they were actually a team. Next up, the Dallas Fuel versus the Philadelphia Fusion. And it was the Philadelphia Fusion win. That Zest got MVP. What is the Fuel doing? the Dynasty and the Fuel, they're both on the same boat. I don't know what the hell those two teams have been doing. And the Dynasty and Fuel, I would have thought like they were very similar. They would maybe go to like maybe the lower bracket semifinals, if lucky, maybe to the lower bracket final, because we already knew the Shockers guaranteed to be in the grand final, and maybe the Gladiators, maybe even the Dragons. I don't know, maybe even the Reign or the Fusion. I'm not too sure. But the Fuel and the Dynasty, they largely disappointed me this season. In this tournament, I must say, especially against their opponent regions. Next up, we got the Florida Mayhem versus the London Spitfire, and it was a reverse sweep for the Florida Mayhem to get the win off the Spitfire. Actually got MVP. This was a very, very lucky win, I must say, for the Mayhem. Not because they would get eliminated, but also because I feel like the Spitfire are a bit better than the Mayhem, I must say. Very surprising, but it was a good victory for the Mayhem nonetheless. Lower round 2, we got the Atlanta Reign versus the Houston Outlaws, and it was the Atlanta Reign winning that match. Hawk got MVP. I'll just mention this here. I can't remember which match it was. I think it was this one because Pelican, obviously formerly from the Atlanta Reign versus old team. It was Lastro. I think it was Lastro. He gave the enemy team the 2 number 1s. Basically flipped them off. It was pretty funny. I'm not too sure if there's been a fine. I don't think so. I don't think a fine has been revealed yet. But that was pretty funny. He's just stacking up fines. It was really, really funny. But either way, it didn't really do anything much for them. Atlanta Reign advances to lower bracket quarterfinals. Next up, another very close game involving the Florida Mayhem. This time was against the Philadelphia Fusion, and it was the Fusion winning that. MN3 got MVP. Once again, a very close game. This definitely shows of how close some of the West and East teams are, but ultimately the West teams are better than the East teams. So it's kind of a polar opposite from last year, where originally last year it was actually the East teams who were better. It was mainly the Shanghai Dragons sweeping everybody. Now the Shark and the Gladiators and even the Reign have been coming out, basically just punching. You're just punching up them. But the Fusion does win this match against the Florida Mayhem. M3 got MVP. Next up, in the low bracket quarterfinals, this was another shock win for me. The Atlanta Reign winning against the Shanghai Dragons 3-1. I thought it was going to be close. I mean, it was actually pretty close, but I thought the Dragons was going to just squeeze it out by a bit. But this kind of told me, okay, I think the East teams might be weaker than the West teams. And it's also very impressive if you actually look at it, that the Reign actually, they eliminated 3 out of the 4 East teams. They eliminated the Dynasty, the Dragons, and later the Fusion. They didn't eliminate the Sparkle, obviously, because as you can see, actually, we'll talk about it right now. The Sparkle was eliminated by the Fusion. Zest got MVP. It's pretty crazy to think about that one team basically single-handedly took down a region. It's pretty funny though. But the Fusion does get the win, and is this maybe a resurgence for the Fusion? I don't know. We will have to wait and see for that though. And for the low bracket semifinals, it was the Atlanta Reign winning against the Fusion. MVP was Venom. I forgot to talk about the upper bracket semifinals. I will get to that after this. But great job by the Reign to basically sweep all of the East region teams. But the Fusion have been looking really good now, which is a great sign. Upper bracket semifinals. We'll jump up to this because I forgot to do this one. The SF Shock 3-0ing the Shanghai Dragons. I'll be honest, I am not surprised that they even 3-0 the Dragons. The Shock have just been an animal. They've just been animals out there. I don't know how they've just been dominated basically. But obviously they did lose in the grand final though. They've just been absolutely dominant. So I'm not even surprised that the Shock smashed the Shanghai Dragons. Papa was of course MVP. And it was a very close game for the LA Gladiators against the Hangzhou Spark. And it was Hangzhou who got MVP and the Gladiators winning that match. Very, very close. The Spark could have... I mean, I feel like the Gladiators and the Spark are very similar in play style. Very similarly of where they are in the standings. But, yeah, I mean... That's just how that is. And the Gladiators advances to the upper bracket final, which we'll talk about right now. The SF Shock versus the LA Gladiators. Once again, a very, very, very close game. It was Proper who got MVP. And the SF Shock advanced himself into the grand final. So the Gladiators put up a great fight though, so it doesn't really matter for that. Lower bracket final, the Gladiators winning against the Atlanta Reign. I'm not even surprised, to be honest. I mean, it was actually a really close game though. But it wasn't enough for the Reign to beat out the Gladiators. Hangzhou was MVP. So they do, and it was a rematch basically of the upper bracket final to the grand final, and it was the LA Gladiators taking home the victory after actually a C9 that the Shock did. Yes, the San Francisco Shock did a C9 and basically ended the game at Dorado. Yeah, not great. It was actually a really good game though. It was very, very close. But I mean, the Shock was very close of making a massive reverse sweep. But it just wasn't enough though. Shu was MVP. It just wasn't enough for the Shock, and I mean the C9 did not help them at all. So I'm unlucky there for the Shock, who once again doesn't win a tournament. They have not won a single tournament this season. I'll probably maybe change in what's the next one, Summer Showdown. That might change for that, but we just have to wait and see. Let's have a look at the league points. So for the West region, we'll have a look at this. The LA Gladiators have now entered the lead only by 1 point though over the Shock. Then we got the Dallas Fuel, the Houston Outlaws. The Atlanta Reign has moved up in front of the London Spitfire after finishing in 3rd place. Then we got the Florida Mayhem, Toronto Defiant, Washington Justice, and the Boston Uprising in the top 10. Then 11th to 13th, the NYXL, the Paris Eternal, and the Vancouver Titans, who actually released Shockwave earlier this week. And then finally for the East, Seoul Dynasty is with 13 points, 2 points in front of the Hangzhou Spark and the Shanghai Dragons. Then we got the Philadelphia Fusion, the Chengdu Hunters, the LA Valiant, and the Guangzhou Charge. So that's the standings, and obviously combined it will be Gladiators and the Shock up in top, and then the Seoul Dynasty in 3rd place. Then it'll be the Fuel, and then Outlaws, Spark, and Dragons will be there. The Atlanta Reign will be, I think was top 6, I think, I might be wrong. There'll be the Spitfire and the Fusion Tide. That's quite ironic as both of them were in the grand final in 2018. Then everyone else, which I can't be bothered to name. Let's now have a look at the next one, which is the Summer Showdown, and we'll just have a look at the week 15. These are only for the West, and obviously I'll be just if we have a look at which matches will be good to watch, or matches to watch out for. Maybe the rematch against the Spitfire Mayhem. That'll be pretty good. What other ones? Maybe the Gladiators versus Fuel. That might be pretty decent. Titans versus Defiance, maybe. The Turnover versus Justice, probably not, but just putting it out there. Titans versus Eternal. This match right here is what everyone is gonna be watching. I bet everyone's gonna be watching this match. This is basically the toilet bowl. Actually, if you have the Eternal versus the Excelsior, it would be the second toilet bowl, but not that bad. This could have been the toilet bowl if the Eternal didn't win that match. I can't remember who it was against, but either way, say if Titans can get their first win of the season. If it is up against the Eternal, then we have a 3-way fight for 11th place. That'll be very interesting to watch. But that's really about it for me. Congratulations to the LA Gladiators for winning the Midseason Madness tournament. But that's really about it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Catch you guys all next time in the next one. Goodbye.